Kyle Roof, Lorem Ipsum, winning this test league.
I did it to make fun of SEOs that say that all you need to do is write good content. I think I'm one of the few people on the planet that has had a Google rule written specifically for them. Believe it or not, I'm a white hat SEO. Like, people, if you're constantly doing SEO, if you're constantly applying stuff to that site, you will become one of the top SEOs in the world.
Kyle Roof, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I was just talking to my team and I was like, we have to book in this podcast because, the whole SEO community kind of knows about you. And I've heard some great things from my fellow community members. And I was leaving for Europe tomorrow and I was like, I'll have to do this podcast, last minute. So yeah, I'm really grateful you came onto this.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Those that don't know the backstory, I was an hour late and I apologize.
So for all the listeners who are listening, I think you're quite aware in the SEO space with all the tactics and tests you do with the on-page. But all the listeners who are listening and who are seeing your face for the first time or might have heard you, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. I am Kyle Roof. I'm the co-founder of High Voltage SEO, which is an agency that has offices in Berlin, Melbourne, and Phoenix, and now in Jamaica.
Wow.
We do local to national to international to everything in between. I'm the creator and co-founder of Page Optimizer Pro, which is an on-page SEO tool. And I'm also the co-founder of Internet Marketing Gold, which is a place with courses. And so my courses are there. And I think we have over 40 other instructors with courses in. And we also do some tests on Google's algorithm, which is one of the things I'm maybe most known for is running tests on the algorithm to see what is or is not a ranking factor and see what really does work.
Awesome. And what's your background story? Like, how did you discover SEO? How did you get onto it? Like, I see you wearing those geeky glasses and I can see there's a bit of scientific background or something.
In a past life, I was an attorney. I was a trial attorney, and I did divorce, custody, and support. So I was in court every day, and I really hated it. I decided to take a year off. My wife was also an attorney. She was doing violent crime, like rape, robbery, and murder. And she also was pretty tired of it. And we decided to take 1 year off just to kind of recharge the batteries. And we moved to South Korea and we taught English to kindergartners, which was a slight change. When you're teaching kindergartners, it's a different expectation level than I could go to jail for 20 years or I could lose my children, right? It was a little bit better. But that 1 year turned into 5. And while we were there, we started a business, and that business needed a website. And it was a pretty complex website. It took me a while to get some developers that could actually do the site. And once I had a strong crew, I realized that I could general contract websites. And from there, the very short version is that we started doing that. And that business didn't do as well as hoped. Some things intervened, but we'd also then kind of pivoted into SEO. I just heard about this thing called SEO, and I was like, oh, we could do this as like a service package, like a monthly service recurring after we build a website. And that kind of turned into the main gig. And then I met my business partner that I have now, Andy Stephen. And then we created High Voltage, and that was 10 years ago and some change.
Oh, I love this story, brother. I mean, I remember the first time you popped up on the internet, and it was just kind of like the SEO test you did with Lorem Ipsum site. And
yeah.
And it just blew up. I think it's like 4 years ago now, and I still remember it. Like Kyle Roof, Lorem Ipsum, winning this test league. Yeah. So how did you get that test, and how it all came into,
Sure.
Yeah.
That'll be with me until I die, I think.
Yeah.
That story.
Yeah.
The test was in 2018, and it was or the competition, if you will. It was a public competition. I think 27 professionals entered, and it was a real sprint. You had 30 days. And the only rule was you had to use a brand new site. But after that, there weren't any rules. You could do whatever techniques that you liked to rank. But it was only 30 days. So that's a real sprint.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the 30 days, only 7 sites ranked for anything, which is pretty impressive when you think about that 27 people who were pretty confident in their SEO entered. And I entered with my team. And we have a really strong team at High Voltage, and we entered and we thought we could do this. And technically, we took fifth out of those seven, but nobody was lighting the world on fire. I think the guy who's now actually a personal friend, Igor, he was on page 8, and I think we were on page 9. But about 2 weeks after the competition, without doing anything else, we shot up to page 1, and then about 2 weeks after that, we were number 1. And then about 2 weeks after that, we were number 1 in maps as well. So we were number 1 maps and number 1 organic. And a little while after that, we actually wiped out the maps, and we were the knowledge panel. So we were the term. And the term was rhinoplasty Plano. Rhinoplasty is a nose job, and Plano is a city right outside of Dallas, Texas, in the US. And for a while, we were actually the knowledge panel for that. And people really lost their minds on it. And the reason that they lost their minds was because we built the site in Lorem Ipsum. And what we did is we did the math on how many times we needed rhinoplasty Plano, how many times we needed its variations, and how many times we needed contextual terms in very specific places on the page. And then we did about 2,000 or 1,500 words of Lorem Ipsum, and very crassly copied and pasted the terms into the areas that they needed to go on that page. And then the page obviously ranked very, very well. About 3 months later, there was an article done on it, and it was like Google ranks site in Latin on Search Engine Journal. You can look it up; the article is still there. But in the original version of the article, they listed my name and the site, and about 6 hours later, the site was taken down by Google, which I guess is fair play. But the tone of the article was that I did this whole thing to make fun of Google, and that wasn't true at all. I did it to make fun of SEOs that say that all you need to do is write good content, because you do need to write good content to convert. When people come to the site and you want them to do something, you want them to buy something, you want them to give you your email or whatever, you do need to write good content for that. But ranking is a whole other thing. And what I was demonstrating was ranking comes down to math. And if you give the algorithm the math that it wants, you can rank very well. It doesn't matter what else is on the page at all. And what was interesting is a few years later, I have a course called White Hat SEO. Believe it or not, I'm a white hat SEO. Like people don't think that. I'm like, just because I test the algorithm doesn't mean that I do terrible things, and I don't. A lot of our clients are like banks and insurance companies, and they don't want to get anywhere near anything black hat. So we have to have very effective white hat techniques. But a few years ago, I did a course called White Hat SEO, and I just had to refresh myself on the guidelines. And in the guidelines, on the no-no list, in the automatically generated content, there's a thing that says you can't have a web page that has a keyword and with words that the user doesn't understand, like gibberish. And I was like, when did that go into play? Because I don't remember that at all. So I took the URL and I threw it in the Wayback Machine. And you can see that it actually came out as a rule 1 week after my site, after the competition ended and people could see my site. It came out 1 week after that. And then 3 months later was when my site was de-indexed based on that rule. So I think I'm one of the few people on the planet that has had a Google rule written specifically for them.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, when I saw that as well, I was talking to my SEO mates that time. I was like, wow, this guy is a genius. And yeah, you kind of had like so much attention that time. Like, I would just want to ask you something, like, how was that for you? Like having all that attention, that test, like, how did you transition it? Like personally, were you like, I'm going to create a brand, I'm going to maybe start an agency, or what was going in your mind at that time?
A couple of things were happening. One, the other thing that kind of happened too was that on that same day that they took my site down, that night from like 1:20 to 1:27 a.m., something like that, they took down 20 of my test sites. And those sites had nothing to do with the competition site. They didn't link to the.
Were they on the same hosting? Same hosting?
No, they was spread across a lot of different hosting, a lot, and they didn't link to each other either. They're all just sites that I used to test the algorithm, and that struck me as very punitive. That wasn't them saying I did anything. That was them specifically going after stuff that I was doing, and in the moment it wasn't very fun. But then I realized they just completely validated everything that I was saying. If I had gotten lucky, or if I was talking nonsense, they would have rolled their eyes and moved on. But because they specifically went after sites that I was using to test the algorithm, and they created that rule that said that you couldn't do a site like that, that means that I really tapped into something that shows how you can learn how the algorithm works, how you can determine what is or is not a ranking factor, what is a stronger factor or a weaker factor. And in doing that, we really built a lot of the agency off of that concept that, we are scientifically based, we are math based, and we run tests on algorithms, on Google's algorithm, and we don't test on your site.
Right.
And that was the thing that really kind of resonated with a lot of people, that we run our own test sites, we figure out what works, and then we bring it to your site, not the other way, where most, I think the majority of SEOs test on their own client sites or test on their own sites to see if something works or does not work. And that's not really the best way to go, because if you run afoul of Google, you do something that they don't like, you're putting your entire site or your client site at risk.
Yeah. And how many of these tests you're doing on a monthly basis? Would you like to share like any latest tests you're doing, like in 2023 as we're talking?
My latest tests are not very sexy. Like Ahrefs came out with YEP, a new search engine. And so one of the things I wanted to see is if YEP just went with their metrics. When they rank something, is it just straight on Ahrefs metrics, and like the number one site will be the highest of their metrics and below. And it's not. It's based on something else, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
But that was one of the things like I just kind of wanted to see. I'm also working a lot on indexing zones. Right. So you've got different places on a web page, for example, and a lot of those are ranking factors, but not all the ranking factors are also indexing factors. Meaning if you have terms in a particular area, that you can get a page to show up in Google for that particular term. And so there are very specific areas, and those are shifting a lot right now on what are the indexing zones and what are not, especially a lot of stuff in the CSS. And used to be indexing zones where you could put words into CSS, and if they're not visible on the page, you can still get a page to show for the term. And a lot of that's kind of going away. So a lot of my recent tests are on indexing zones, which is not terribly sexy.
Yeah.
But valuable and could be very good.
And you creating all these test ideas, and what's the team looking like for who are conducting all these tests? Like what's it's like in the in-house structure basis?
You don't need a very, very large team. We have a very small team of like 4.
Okay.
It's really, what I'm learning more than anything though is that test sites have a shorter lifespan than they used to, where you could run a site and run a lot of tests on it. And I'm finding that they stop indexing a lot quicker than they used to. And so you do have to kind of burn down a test site and then fire a new one up in order to get pages to index. And once the page is indexed, then you can start testing things and trying things out. But indexing test sites has been an issue for a couple of years. And what I'm finding is that really there's just a really short lifespan, or short shelf life, if you will, for a testing site. And so we're kind of playing around with how we can ramp that up a little bit and get more sites going so we can get more tests. We have a whole back catalog of tests that we want to run, but it's kind of figuring out how we can get test sites to index their pages better, or faster, or kind of some techniques on that is really what we're working on.
Sweet. And yeah, content strategy, content. What's Kyle's content strategy looking for? Like,
a big thing that I subscribe to is what's called Avalanche theory. This comes from Chris Carter, and you can read it in Builder Society. SEO with no resources is the article, and I highly recommend anybody read it. But what I realized is that you can beat your competitors with better research. And sites do better when they rely less on SEO. And the theory goes that your site has a natural tier, and that's the level that Google will instantly trust you for a term. And you've probably experienced this, where you launch like some sort of long tail term and it just like immediately ranks like on page 2, and you really didn't do any SEO to it. And you feel just like an SEO god. And then you take a term that's almost exactly the same and it won't crack the top 100. You feel like an absolute idiot. And what's the difference between those two terms? The difference is that the first one was likely in your tier. So you didn't have to do any SEO really to rank well for it. And the other one was not in your tier, and Google is not going to immediately trust you for it. And then the idea is that if you continue to post content in your tier, what happens is then you start to get clicks and impressions, and your site's ranking for keywords, and then you move up a tier without any SEO. And then you can go after more competitive terms, and then you raise up and go for more competitive terms, and raise up and go for more competitive terms. So a big part of my content strategy is going to try to post content in my tier so that I can raise the authority of the site, the strength of the site, however you like to think about it. And I'm going to use a internal linking structure in order to pass that authority or that juice around from those pages and essentially out research my competitors. So I'm not reliant upon boosts or kind of external signals, especially like backlinks, which Google will go after. Because if you're doing it this way, when there's a Google update, there's nothing to be taken away. You're not at risk for any updates because you're not growing the site with necessarily hardcore SEO.
Okay. So your strategy basically depends on all this high tier content. And what percentage would you say like compiles like the backlink side of the strategy?
I mean, so the first thing you want to do is you want to build your target page. You know, that's kind of like the money term where you're trying to get somebody to do something. The next thing to do would be supporting content. That's content that that I use to post within my tier, and then and link up to support my target pages. Once you've got that dialed in, then you want to look at those external signals, traditionally backlinks or anything else that you think might be an external signal. But the more you've dialed in your on page, the more you've posted within your correct tier, and the more that your internal linking is correct, the fewer backlinks you need. And so you really want to get that stuff done first and really obsess on that before you start doing any kind of outreach for link building. But link building is certainly a big part of SEO. It is a big part of our strategy, but what we try to focus on first is what we're doing on our site, because the only thing that you completely control is what you put on your website.
Right.
You don't control another site that's linking to you. You don't control how Google thinks about that. I mean, none of that. So really, if you can dial in the things you control the most, you'll have much more evergreen strategies, safer strategies, and then strategies that will cost you less in terms of what you need to do externally.
True. I mean, I've been testing with a lot of like interlinking. First, I'll optimize, like you said, like a high tier content, better research, better internal linking, better outbound links. And then I'll just like kind of smash some backlinks and see how the page moves, right? And initially, I'll just get those long-term keywords ranking on the top pages or whatever. And yeah, so my strategy is like content, then backlinks, 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 backlinks. What are your thoughts on it?
I would try to do fewer backlinks.
Right.
I think
Right.
is what I would do.
Yeah.
But
and kind of like if I have a client and he's in CBD and he wants to rank, let's say CBD oil, pure CBD oil.
It's like, a tough term for sure.
Yeah. There's no way like I won't suggest him like thousands of backlinks over the next couple of, course of months. And just rely on just content strategy. What would you say in this case? Like a client comes to you, he's like, Kyle, this is my website. I want to rank pure CBD oil, top 5, top 10, whatever his expectations are. What would you recommend him?
So actually, I did this within my White Hat SEO course. As I was teaching the course, I built a site in the CBD niche from scratch without any backlinks to show that you could actually do this. And so, the site we only did for 8-10 months, so it wasn't a long-term project, but we got it off the ground, got it ranking, got it going with no backlinks to prove that even in one of the dirtiest niches, when you're in CBD or THC or those types of niches, which are often a race to the bottom in terms of how many horrible backlinks you can build, you can actually still out research your competitors and build sites up this way. Now, you certainly need backlinks to go after some of those more difficult terms. And I'm not discounting that at all, but I think you can do a lot more than people would assume, even in a very difficult niche, through research, through posting content that's in your tier, slowly but surely, naturally raising your site, and even doing it from a site from scratch. So not even buying a site that has any inherent authority already, but like something that is just straight from zero. So you can definitely do a lot more than I think a lot of people really know that you can do.
And how are you leveraging these sites who are just like fresh, like you said, just like 0 months, 0 age? What's your strategy like looking for the first 30 days, let's say?
Well, I don't really like building sites from scratch, to be honest. Like we can do it. I think a better strategy is to look for a site that's about 8-10 months old. It's proven that it can actually rank for some things, right, and I'd buy that site. Yeah, I think is a better play than building something from scratch. So for example, that site might only cost $1,000 to build, but I would rather buy the site for $3,000. It's already proven that it can rank for things rather than trying to build directly from scratch. Because there are times when Google hates the site for whatever reason. You don't know what that URL might have been before you had it. And Google might have hated it. Like they really might have hated it. And that's going to really make an uphill battle for you. So instead of going straight from scratch, what I would do is I would buy a site that has proven itself that it can rank for a few terms in the niche that I'm going after. And then I'd pay a little more for that site that's kind of, I don't like the term sandbox, but for lack of a better word, you can prove that it's out of the sandbox. It is ranking for things. And
I was going to mention sandbox, and I was like, no, I'm not going to mention sandbox.
It's not my favorite term because
it's too outdated.
I don't think it's accurate, really. But but just you kind of prove that, because there are times I would say, you as an SEO expert, as a site expert, you can build 5 sites. Well, you can build 5 sites and you can do everything perfect, like just 100% correct, and one of them might not go. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And so I wouldn't take that risk necessarily. I would get a site that's got a little bit of age to it and is proving that it's ranking for the terms that I'm interested in. And I would jump on that side rather than trying to build a site straight from scratch.
Chat-GPT 4.
Fun. Fun.
How are you playing with the content strategy?
So we've been in the AI space for quite some time to use AI as a first draft. Right. And I think that's a great way to use it to get something like done quickly and off the ground and is in the ballpark. That's how I would use those kind of things. And then the content team does a lot of editing and adds tone and branded terms and technical terms and voice and that kind of stuff. But it's a great way to get through that first draft is using some sort of AI tool. And so that's how we use it, and that's how I would recommend people use it.
So it's safe, it's kind of in the gray. What are you suggesting people?
So Google's underlying principle is like, does this add anything to the web? Like, is this adding anything to the conversation? And one of the problems with all AI tools is that they are glorified spinners. They're taking information and then through language prediction, they're saying like, okay, we think that these words are associated with that. But essentially what they're doing is a very glorified spin, of like something that was being done 10 years ago with like content chief or something like that. So if you're adding to the web, it doesn't matter where it comes from. But if it's just spun content, which a lot of AI is, and you're just posting it and putting it up and it's not adding any value, that's where Google's going to have a lot of heartburn. And that's where you're going to run into issues with sites that won't rank very well, or sites that will get hit by a particular update. So when you use it, make sure that you're editing it to the point that it then also adds some value. That there is a new perspective or a new voice or a new thing. So I think it's a great tool to use to advance your writing, where you can get writing done quickly and you can start putting out a lot of content. But I would just make sure that you're editing enough that you're adding something new to the conversation.
Awesome. A lot of valuable topics covered, and I think the audience might be liking all the things you've said, and I'm loving it as well. Yeah, coming to the next one, I'm going to be a little vulnerable. So the next topic. So the next topic.
That's what the people want, right? They want to see real stuff, right?
Real stuff. Real vulnerability between two SEOs. So yeah, the next topic is like EEAT. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to be honest, brother. I've never, ever known what EEAT is. And I'm been in the SEO space for almost a decade now. I rank quite high-end stuff, I'd say. But yeah, like, what is EEAT for all the SEOs who don't know about this term, and how important is it for SEO?
Sure. The basic idea to think about that concept is, should this site be in the index in the first place? Should it even be there? And when you think about, if somebody is giving advice and somebody follows that advice and then they are harmed, is there a way for them to get restored? And that could be as simple as a refund, or like a new product, a new shipment coming their way, or, in an extreme case, that could be a lawsuit. Is it easily identifiable how they can be restored? Is really kind of, I think, the main principle. And so affiliate sites get hit a lot with EAT type situations, but it's because they often try to hide who is actually owning the site or who is behind the site or where they're located. And I think from Google's perspective is like, if somebody's trying to hide who they are and then somebody follows this advice or they buy this product and they're harmed in a certain way, and they can't find out who's responsible, then there's no point in having that website in the index to begin with. So like if somebody's giving out advice and they're saying you should do this, this or that to lose weight or to be, more desirable or to do whatever, and that turns out to be really bad advice, Google wants to know who that is so that somebody is actually responsible. So the two kind of big questions are, who is responsible for this website? Who owns this site? What's the business that's behind it? And then who's responsible for the content? And that's also usually the business, but also, is there a real person that's actually writing this content? And so I think those are the two massive considerations. Like, first, should this be in the index, and why should it be in the index is like, who is responsible for the site and who's responsible for the content. And so sites that try to hide that are in danger of running afoul of any time that Google decides to do a sweep. A MEDIC style update is what they call it. And I think initially this was in what they call YMYL, your money or your life sites. So these are sites that give financial advice or give health advice. Sites that sell supplements, for example. It started there because you can see the obvious immediate danger to somebody following that type of advice. But then I think it is expanded to pretty much every website on the web. And it's probably some sort of bar on traffic that once a site gets up to a certain level, then Google's going to check it out. And then they're going to go see, like, does it have enough signals? And keep in mind that Google can't walk to your business and see like, oh, this is legitimate. This looks good. All it can do is crawl as a bot would crawl through a site and see what's there. And there isn't one EAT signal that you need necessarily. It's ticking enough of the boxes so that when the bot comes and says, like, is this a legitimate business? Can I identify who's responsible for this site? Can I identify who's responsible for this content? And you're looking to tick enough of those boxes where the bot will be like, okay, good, we're good here. That's kind of the goal. So things that you can do is like, you should actually have a business for your website. And I know, I know that's not the easiest thing to do, but like, if you're taking money from your website, that's called a business. And you should be registered somewhere for that business. You should be paying tax somewhere for that business. And I know everyone loves paying tax, but you should be legitimate, right? Yeah. Like the real businesses are legitimate and they are registered somewhere. And so real businesses can show their address. They can show where they're registered. Now, you don't necessarily have to give your home address, like say you're working from home. You can register your business address. That's called a registered agent. That exists. That's a real thing. But it takes a little bit of time. It takes a half day to figure all this out. Almost all EAT signals you can get done in half a day. But the problem is that they're tedious. They're like, I don't want to do that. But like real businesses do that. And so I think if your site gets to a certain level and you decide not to embrace EAT signals, really, it's a very risky proposition, because I don't think it's an if Google will check. It's a when Google will check your site. And usually sites that I've seen that get tagged are sites that are just crushing it. Like they're on this path and they're just doing great, and then all of a sudden just drop off immediately. And you can go into their site and see like, all they have for a contact is like one of those like really generic like 3-box contact forms on the site that every human knows goes nowhere. Like contact a site and put in a name and an email and like a little text. That's all that's on the site. There's no number to contact. There's no address. There are no multiple emails. There's no like social signals like where you can hit us on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. None of that exists on those sites that get tagged. Now, that's not the be all end all. Like as I said, it's not just having those specific things. It's having kind of a whole list of things that essentially establish that you are legitimate, that you're real, and that somebody can get a hold of you if they need it, and then a bot can see it. That's the biggest thing. Now, it's not just that a human can look at the site and be like, oh, the site's totally legit. It's that a bot needs to look at the site and understand that it's totally legit. And that's where I think EAT comes into play.
Okay, makes sense. And it's all about the legitimacy of the business. And you can also create...
and the people behind it.
Okay.
It's easy to see like, okay, so there's a business behind this thing, and this business has humans. Those are two massive things that you need to be able to demonstrate.
And you can also create fake EAT signals as well?
Well, welcome to the internet. Yeah, you absolutely can.
Yeah.
I mean, I would, if I were you, I'd try to do it as legitimately as possible. But sure, people are using fake EAT signals all the time, and I think doing fine with it. I wouldn't advocate for that, because honestly, you should be able to share who you are. Like in this day and age, like I don't know what you're trying to hide by not saying like, okay, our company is behind this site. I don't know what you're doing by doing that,
Right.
other than probably a tax dodge would be my guess. Like
unless you're in Dubai.
All right. Well, again, if you're in Dubai and you don't have any corporate tax, that's perfect. Yeah. Or, a lot of my companies are registered in Wyoming, and we have companies registered in Malta or Belize or other type places. So you can get into advantageous tax situations, but you're still also legitimate. You still actually exist somewhere.
I mean, makes sense. Thanks for uncovering it for me for the first time. Like, I appreciate it. But yeah, coming back to the next conversation topic. Let's say you've got like an SEO mate, and he rings you up and he's like, "Kyle, I've got this new niche I entered. Can you check my site?" Like, what's the most obvious on-page mistakes you see, like, which most SEOs do, and it could be avoided?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes everybody makes is that they really try to over clever things, or they try to like out Google.
Out Google.
They're the top 4 places to put a keyword have been the same since I've been testing them since 2015. You put your keyword in your title tag, in your H1, in paragraph tags, and in your URL. And if you do those 4 things, you've done 67, 70% of SEO right there. And I don't know how many people decide not to do that, where they're like, "Oh, I'm going to put a variation of my keyword here. I'm going to do that." Like, why make it hard? It's a bot. It's a bot running an algorithm. It needs to understand as quickly and as easily as possible what this page is about and if it likes it. And so when you start to try to hide the keyword, that you really want to rank for it in weird ways, you're really just shooting yourself in the foot. So really do the basics. Don't skip the basics on these things. Just do that and you'll be very, very successful.
Stick to the basics.
Got to do them. People want to like skip to step 12 and they haven't done steps 1 through 11.
Yeah, I agree.
And I was like, we've got this like crazy, awesome, like link building campaign strategy concept. And I'm like, that's lovely, and that's great. But you can fire all the links you want at a blank page and it's not going to rank.
Yeah,
I've done that. Yeah. You have to have a page on your site for the terms you want to win. And then you need to optimize that page with the content on your site for the terms you want to win. And if you haven't taken care of that, then it doesn't really matter how clever or how interesting or how novel a strategy you have. It's just simply not going to be successful.
Okay. And yeah, you and me have been in SEO for a while now. So, like, how is it, our relationship with the SEO? Like, sometimes the dopamine levels could overflow our psychic levels. What would you say, like, your relationship with SEO and stress, or what are your hacks when you kind of take too many projects and then you have to create too many strategies and do too much mathematics? What's your caliber in that, and how you use the tools to handle I would say, like, all these projects?
I have 2 thoughts there. Thought number 1 is one of the things that really feels good for me is that on my worst day in SEO, nobody went to jail. And in my worst day as a lawyer, somebody went to jail for a long time. Yeah. So for me, there's a lot of perspective.
Not everybody's a lawyer.
For me, there's a lot of perspective here and like what's going on. And there's really no such thing as an SEO emergency. Yeah. Like there are sites can go down. Like that's a website emergency, but very rarely, like, never on an airplane have I heard the captain say, like, "We have an emergency. Is there an SEO on this plane?" Like it's just simply not going to happen. So for me, like it does kind of take the stress level down immediately, that we're going to be okay. Tomorrow is another day. We're going to be fine. The other thing I would say, though, is that as an SEO, something that I really learned from my business partner, Andy Steven, is that we don't want to build a job for ourselves. We want to build a business. And so you can't be the one that is doing all the work all the time. You have to have it set up so that you're actually building a structure So they're actually building a business to do SEO. And initially, of course, you're the one doing the work. So if you're just starting out, you are that person. But slowly but surely, you should be able to build out an infrastructure so you get to the point that you are just on the strategy meetings. You're not the one doing the nitty gritty. You're not the one stressing out over this or that, or like even talking to a client. One of the happiest moments I had in my life was last year, where one of our senior account managers said, hey, we've got this client. They did their 6-month contract. They're not renewing. It went fine. They're just going in a different direction or whatever. I think they're bringing stuff in-house. And she's like, I'm sending this email out to them, but do you mind putting some eyeballs on it before I send it? I said, no problem. And I look at this email, and then I wrote her back, and I was like, let's just like to take a moment. I have no idea who this client is. Like, I didn't know that we landed them. I didn't know we did any service for them. I didn't know what's going on. And I was like, then I realized, like, oh, I think I have a real company, where like, I might have helped on a strategy where like a question was asked, like, hey, in this situation, should we do A or B? But in terms of actually physically working with that client, I wasn't involved in any aspect of it. So what I think can help reduce your stress is by letting those things go, by training people up that can actually do those things and really have the mindset of building a business out rather than building just a better job for yourself. And I think if you could do that, you can really start to de-stress and you'll be able to handle things a lot better, especially as you want to scale and grow.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like your detached way of doing SEO and running the company.
To be, like if you're, a big part of SEO is problem solving, right? How to get from A to B, but that takes a lot of energy. And a lot of people don't realize that even if you're just like sitting there and thinking about something, that takes a lot of energy. And you want to get rid of those tasks that are going to suck that energy away so that you're not going to be able to make those types of good decisions, or to be able to connect those dots in a way that's going to put a good strategy together for your sites or for your client sites or whatever. So I think the more you can delegate out that work, the better you will even be as an SEO, because now you can really focus on the fun stuff, on actually creating the strategy or like creating the campaign for how we can get from this spot and try to get to that spot.
Or checking the rank tracker.
You don't do that.
You don't do that.
It's kind of like if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want to hit on the scale every day, right?
Yeah.
It'll drive you insane.
Yeah.
And you're going to get
and it's
depressed.
always dancing. It's always like this all the time.
Exactly right. And you're going to get depressed, and you're going to check your weight like in the morning, and it's this thing, and you're going to check it in the afternoon, it's that thing. Focus on the progress, check it once a month.
Yeah.
And then you're going to see overall positive improvement. But when you're checking the day-to-day, that will actually drive you insane. And it's the same with your rankings. Don't do that every day. That's silly.
Yeah. So Kyle Roof speaking in Chiang Mai, keynote speaker. What can we expect?
Do you want to talk speechcraft for a second?
Anything.
So something that I'm sorry, my mouth is really dry. I apologize. Something that I've been a public speaker on SEO since 2015. And I don't know how many conferences I've spoken out live, but it's been a lot. And then right now I average probably 50 podcast YouTube shows a year. So I do about one a week in terms of average. So I do a lot of public speaking. And what I've realized is that nobody remembers what you talked about, but they remember how they felt. They remember that feeling they had when they watched you speak. And I remember thinking very early on, especially when I did my very first talk, SEO talks are wildly boring. And I was like, you know what? There's no reason this can't be fun. I could get up on stage and I can show you how to do internal linking. And I do that a lot in my talks. This is an effective way to do internal linking. But who cares? Like they'll get that eventually. But what I realize is that they're coming for an experience. Have you been in a meeting where you're in the middle of this meeting, you're just like, oh man, this meeting should have been an email. Like there's no reason for us to have taken this time. Yeah. It's the same thing with a lot of talks too, where it's like this talk could have been a blog post. And that's not what somebody's coming to a conference to experience. People know how to read, I'm pretty sure. Like they know how to read, especially if they're in this conference. So what I try to bring is an experience. And what I try to bring is something where you actually feel something in the talk. Something will resonate, will really make a lot of sense. In addition, I will show you how I do SEO, and I think people will take from beginner to advanced will always get a nug, that's relevant to them. But what I really focus on is something where somebody can walk out of there and feel like refreshed, or feel like, okay, I can take on SEO, or I can grind another day, or you know what, I can learn more, or this is possible. Like, those are the feelings that I think I want people to leave after they hear me speak. And that's what I really try to bring to the table first. And of course, nugs will be there, don't worry. But
Yeah,
I honestly think that aspect of it is truly secondary
for sure.
to having an experience, with somebody on
I
stage.
mean,
That's
that's what we're doing. We just like using SEO to leverage a lifestyle, to have an experience, and make a living out of it. All of us, we're on the grind, and yeah, it's all about the experience. So all the people who are coming to Chiang Mai, make sure you don't miss Carl Roof, because you're gonna have an amazing experience.
You will. You will get something.
Yeah.
You will feel something.
Yes.
Is the goal.
And if you feel a lot, just get him a bouquet of flowers. I'm sure it's like,
Or just buy me a drink at the bar. A drink at the bar would be better.
sweet. And yeah, Kyle, what's your daily routine? I know you're a family man. You're married, happily married. How do you find that SEO life balance? What are your suggestions to the listeners out there who can't focus on the life and SEO aspect of their being?
I definitely still struggle with that, with work-life balance. I feel like, I wake up somewhere around 6 and I'm immediately on my phone seeing what fires need to be put out, or because you have people working in different time zones.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they send you a message and they're just waiting on a response, and they're not working until they get that response, right? Yeah. So you have to try to get that in. So maybe they have a couple more hours left on their workday in order to get something done. One thing that I would say is that I can do about 80% of my job from my phone, which is a really nice luxury as an SEO. And that does allow me to be a little more present. So I've kind of explained to my family, like, hey, if we go to Disneyland, I will probably check my phone 20, 30 times, and I will fire a little response. But the reason that we're able to experience Disneyland and I can be here today with you and we can travel around the world is because I can do 80% of my job from my phone. And so I think kind of setting those expectations of, this is my job, this is what we do, this is how I make money, this is how we can do the things that we do, does require me to be distracted for a minute out of every hour or something like that. And if we can work on that and understand that, then we can get through it. And I think my family is very understanding of that. And I think we've kind of gotten to a pretty good place where they know I'm going to check my phone and I'm going to respond to a few things, but 85% of the rest of the time I'm present and I'm there and we're having a good time. We're doing fun stuff that we would not be able to do otherwise. Because like when I was a trial attorney, you get 2 weeks off, but you can't take 2 weeks straight off because there's court cases all the time. Like that's just not humanly possible. And so, now as a family, we travel all over the world. Right now we're in Chiang Mai. In July, we're going to fly to the US for a family reunion. And then we're going to fly to London, and we're going to be in the UK for a couple weeks. And then we're looking at Paris, after that. And that's a privilege, and that's really wonderful. But it comes from this job, and it comes from the fact that I can do a lot of my job from my phone. And so if they can kind of put up with that, then we can do all of these other things. And I think it's worked out to be a pretty good trade.
Awesome. So what would be your final SEO advice that you have to give out to all the listeners who are listening today?
Something, people ask me this all the time. And honestly, I think there's a real difference between knowing SEO and doing SEO. I think a lot of people could have listened to this and like, oh, I know that, or I understand that. It's a whole other thing to actually go and do it. Because then you actually have to learn, practically speaking, how to say interlink, or how to put keywords in certain places, or how to do any of that. So if anybody's struggling, what I would say, or they're brand new or whatever, I would say make sure you've got a site that, like a fun site, something that you've got going on, that you care about. But I mean, you don't care if the site burns down, but like, that you like interesting enough that you don't mind writing about it. And then make sure you're actually doing SEO. You're actually putting things into practice. You're seeing what works. Because there are a lot of people that say stuff all the time, oh, this works or that works. But you definitely want a site where you can try that out before you try it out on something that's really important to you. And I would say just constantly, if you're constantly doing SEO, if you're constantly applying stuff to that site, for lack of a better word, a test site, you will become one of the top SEOs in the world, for sure. It's just a matter of actually physically doing it.
Experimenting, testing, analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. And then once you realize like, oh, this guy is talking nonsense, but this gal over here is crushing it and all her stuff works, well, then you know what you should be doing for your sites. But you want to figure that out somewhere else before you then kind of put it on to something you actually care about.
Beautiful. It's been a great conversation, Kyle. Where can people find you?
KyleRoof.com. That's the easiest one. All my stuff is there.
Do you want to mention any of your companies or brands?
Sure. I don't care. Yeah, my agency is High Voltage SEO. My software is Page Optimizer Pro. And my courses and stuff like that, where you can learn about SEO from me and some other people, is Internet Marketing Gold. Yeah, check it out. But if you go to KyleRoof.com, there are links to all that stuff in there.
I appreciate you, Kyle, for all you're doing to the SEO community. Yes.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Kyle.
Same.